What is the relationship between man, his environment, and what should it be?
It is interesting that you put it thus, because you rather state that there is a huge abyss, crevasse. On one side is man living in towns and cities and his ordination with electricity and all of the conglomeration of mechanization that makes his life so easy. And on the other side are mountains full of bears and deer and birds, very unconglomerated, very undisciplined. And man is sitting one side of the crevasse in this city with the whole of his organization, his government, and an enormous mess. And he's very pleased with it. And he is waiting one day to cross that crevasse and put everything right on the other side. I suggest to you that it's going to reverse. The other side is going to come across the crevasse and put this side right. The immensity of the study of classic horticulture does reveal the answer to the question that you put. Man utterly belongs, is adored by nature, is utterly requisite in the whole ordination of the totality of nature, spiritual, mental, and physical, as an absolute necessity for the procedure of destiny in the revolvement of the world and its growth. No animals, no birds, no insects, no snakes, no slugs and snails are in total completeness without the ordinance of man within it. He cannot divorce himself and live in happiness and build an environment that shuts out that connection. This is what is happening, has largely happened. The very fact that man loves the sight, the visual sight of a strawberry, is an internal spiritual reaction and force of the whole revolutionibus of the stars. It must make him at any time pop that strawberry into his mouth, whereby he has begun a whole circulation of reformation of the produce. And he is utterly requisite, both in having to grow those beautiful strawberries, more and more beautiful, for his taste. And as his taste produces more beautiful strawberries, so does his image, his imagination, led by nature in the strawberry itself to want more perfection, more beauty, more lusciousness, more color, which are the invitations of the outer physical expression demanding his destiny to follow its course and to fulfill the law of creation. The bee has performed this for at least 5 million years without alteration in its mathematics, in its government. And it is an overwhelming study, a moral uplift to observe and to know. Therefore, there cannot be any question that, as Pliny said, as Dioscorides has said, and as Ptolemy, all of those enormities have stated, within the realm of herbs, of weeds, is a revelation which is inestimable, uncountable, that will not exactly tell man or lead man what to do, but directs a path upon which traveling he discovers what he is to do. Therefore, man's ordinance within nature, being utterly obedient and reverent of the laws, must carry him into certainty of rediscovering the Garden of Eden, which is somewhat the question that you put.
But it seems to me that man is missing a lot of the cities and the people, mankind, the governments. They're missing on this, and I'm wondering how mankind can get it back.
There seems but one answer. Cease talking, for the attic of the head is stuffed now, stuffed full with words. And words are only guttural noises of visible expression. They are also like the watch, like the calendar. They are very, very poor, gauche nursery toys of the fulfillment of the revolution of us. The moon travelling round the earth is the month. And the sun travelling round the earth with all the planets revolving around it is the year, as we call it. Therefore, we talk about a month and a year, but we don't know what we're talking about. We look at the watch and say, what is the time? But there isn't any. But we actually come to believe it. We have done exactly the same with the whole enormous gift of nature, which is, if you like, the word food or produce. And believe it or not, for you must believe it because you know it, that all food is free. There is no price to it at all. And yet, can you get any food if you don't pay dollars for it? Unless you grow it. And then it is all free. And we have come into a whole state of education, of parental infliction into children, that the very first thing they are to do is not to worry about nature or the whole law of freedom of produce. They are to worry about the prison bars of what to specify to do only in their life and how to make enough money to retire and die. And the whole of food and the whole gifts of nature are sold at calumnious prices until eventually even the spirit departs out of that food and you have got nothing left but a shell, a coffin. Therefore, it seems perfectly plain that indeed somewhere in the very heart of nature is the answer. And it's very difficult to understand and to perceive this today, because everybody in education says, I know, I will tell you, but nobody knows anything, because there is no knowing, there is no knowledge. Knowledge is not something. It is part of a journey. It is not static. Knowledge changes as memory changes. We think we remember something, but that memory is a plant. It grows, and it changes, and it blossoms and fruits, and everything does. And we are pretending that we live and can put anything in a cage and catch it and keep it. Here is the magic that concerns art. All true artists must learn that they must use an instrument, and that to play that instrument they must learn the technique, the system, the mathematics, the revolutionibus, for music is the intervals of the secundus mobile. That is what music is. It's the spaces between the 7 planets. And therefore they must learn that there is an instrument to play and that there is a technique of using that instrument. When they have learned both of those mathematical ordinations, their soul will express itself in the visible, automatically. You do not have to say, I think, I see it like this. I. I has gone, and you belong in the great world of art, which is a classical total. And there is no argument in this. This is the enormous law of nature. The return is obvious, that the education of children is not something to be inflicted into them of how to count, how to add, how to make guttural noises. Those are toys of the nursery. The first primary matter concerning education, very obviously, is the unutterable magic that is nature, the law.
French intensive biodynamic, is that an answer to the totality?
Oh, undoubtedly. Of course it is. You see, this is not just a word. It's a wave. It's an actual wave with a spirit behind it, which was what Steiner's thinkings were. He was nothing new at all. There's nothing new about Steiner. Steiner picked up the waves of Ptolemy, the waves of ancient Egypt, of the Phoenicians, of the earliest Chinese that go out of words, out of Druidism. The French intensive was also picked up by the ancient Greeks, who discovered that all plant life grew better on landslides than the beautiful fertile soils of the alluvial plains, where indeed plants grew well. But on landslides they found that they grew infinitely better. And since they were huge observers of nature, they looked into it to discover what this was. Well, the very first answer is, of course, perfect drainage. What do you mean? Well, let me put a question to you. What is fresh water? What is fresh air? What is fresh vitality? And therefore, what is fresh food? What is fresh water? Is it water sitting still in a basin? What happens? Do we not say it has gone stagnant? What are we talking about? It's not moving. Oh. And then how do we make fresh water? Do you filter it? Oh, yes, you can, but it's not fresh water. Then what is fresh water? Why, look, the very trees, the leaves and the grass are what you might call breathing through infinitesimal little hairs, through their roots, through their stems, through their very flowers, the petals, the leaves. They are breathing all the time, changing one thing into another. And what are they doing? Changing our perniciousness that we spurt out through our noses, through our motor cars, through our living. And they breathe it in, and they say, thank God. And they breathe out again, and it's all clean again, so that we can breathe it in. That is fresh air. And what is fresh water? Water running through the stones, through the rocks, through the roots, through the animal's paws, through bones. And it is being infected by the rotation of the revolution of us, all the stars revolving, the great law of God in nature. And it all the time is what you might call rebreathing, recleaned. Therefore, water which is stagnant, calumnious, and there are plants which you can put in water, and they will make absolute stagnant water drinkable within an hour, by their living, by their breathing. Therefore, perceive that within the whole exhibition of nature, of the visible plants, of visible animals, of visible insects, is a spirit force which is eternal, which is what we call pure, origin, truth. You see, you have to realize, in a certain sense, horticulture has not yet begun. How did all the beautiful apples, the beautiful pears and peaches that we eat come about? They came about through ide, image, which is truth. For realize that reason and intellect will never tell you the truth. It is only through ide, as Goethe says, that truth is visible. Therefore, all of those fruits which we say are so delicious, they came out of the crabapple, the malus. They came out of the wild pear, the pyrrhus, which to us are utterly uneatable. Then perceive what is this importance of man in nature, in the world. We have not begun this incredible and beauteous horticulture of enormity, of the whole world being a Garden of Eden. It is in man's destiny, it is in man's hands to turn it so. Out of his image can come a magnification which cannot even be visible, cannot be seen, cannot be understood or calculated whatever. Is it not true that out of a very packet of stupid little seeds you can produce a garden full of plants, of exquisiteness, which you cannot believe the sight of, the enormity. Therefore you see that these pears, these beautiful apples, came out of man imagining, because he perceived nature and the beauty in nature, he imagined a wonderful rosy apple that would be ripe in February. The moment he had imagined it, he put two and two together. He said, if I pollinate that malus from Siberia with that malus from Spain, I think it might happen. And one of them, out of several million, bang, wallop, abracadabra, and there it was. And so this is the whole matter. But perceive, there is an astonishing law here. That came out of an individual. It came out of an individual, which is seed, which is the utmost Ide and the least metamorphosis. The tree, the plant, is the utmost metamorphosis and the least Ide that produces the seed out of the invisible into the visible. Therefore, you see that it was out of man's image. Now, what was that image? That image, Ide, cannot come out of reason and intellect. It can only come out of truth. But out of reason and intellect can come, I want 10,000 pairs for $100,000. I want 2 tons of apples. I've got to have some money in the bank. I've got to have a motor car. Because I've got to have a motor car, I've got to go to the office. Because I've got to go to the office, I've got to have petrol from Persia. Oh, that's all external. Oh, yes, it's all very essential. But it's not important. The importance is the Ide. This is the master who understands technique and the gift of the soul, which puts the life through the instrument into the world. And it is only by that approach that everything beautiful exists. All else that comes out of reason and intellect does not contain that birth of beauty. Therefore, all beautiful vegetables, all beautiful fruit, flowers, birds, insects, movement, air, water, flows from this source. This is the root, and we do not make it. We do not make it. We imagine it. We manipulate it. We are gardeners. We are made for this. This is our participation. To make a beautiful world, to live a beautiful world. The propulsion of it. We're very important. Nature adores man when he is real. And so you see, there is nothing, there is absolutely nothing that cannot come out of Ide, out of image. You have only to imagine a pear as big as a mountain, and how true the fairy stories are. Where there is a will, there's a way. And it will come about if the approach is from Ide.
Can you tell me what biodynamic horticulture is and how it's fused with French intensive?
I won't, but I will. I can't, but I will try to point towards it. First of all, let us just refer to this matter known as organic culture. Organic is a perfectly straightforward, one-sided attitude to the supply of nature to nature. It means that man does not synthesize, does not add synthetic procedure. Therefore, there is a total and enormous difference between the nominality of organic growers and biodynamic. Organic can be talked about and explained quite simply. Biodynamic is, of course, inexplicable. Biodynamic was a word coined by Steiner, and it refers to total truth. It is the seek of. Therefore, it concerns life, living, and is the utmost connection of spirit with mind, with the body. Therefore, from a horticultural point of view, it has facets which are very clear, and the horticultural is, of course, merely one facet of biodynamic. But you perceive that it immediately points to the whole origin of horticulture. In other words, the government of horticulture, and that is astronomy. And in order to apply astronomy with horticulture, there has to be the consideration of astrology. In other words, perceive, every plant is governed by a destiny. In other words, principally by a planetary revolution, and then by the interweaving of the other planets with that governing planet. You then realize, through astrology, through the horoscope that human beings in their formation are also governed thus, that the very arms, the liver, the kidney, the eyes, the ears, the neck, are all governed astrologically by the astronomy. Therefore you suddenly perceive that there is a line of utter connection between those herbs governed by a principal planet and parts of the body. That not only do you perceive that so clearly, and that those are the very words that we call chemicals, such as iron, sulfur, magnesia. Those are silly words like the calendar, like what is the time, it is 12:30. And that's all they are. And we have become so devoid of total that we are inclined to take that which looks like that from coal, for instance sulfur, and say that that is sulfur from the mustard, and of course it is not. It has no relation to it at all. Also perceive that because the planetary system is not static, the very contents of plants themselves, the very contents of the body itself, is not static. What you have in you at one moment, you do not have at another. And plants likewise. There are times to collect the food. There are times to collect the herbs, the juices. And why is it that you use only the root of one and the flower of another and the leaf of another? It is for that very matter. But we talk about the onion, and we forget that it's a lily, and we forget that it's a flower. You talk about it as a vegetable. And so you see these absurd categories which are altogether untrue.
The methods of biodynamic, French intensive, there are many involved.
Many.
And they're all related to each other.
Many.
Could you briefly explain the most important ones and
Yes.
the relationship to the others?
Yes. The most important of all is the final, which concerns man. It is this. I will try to be succinct. The gardener, the horticulturist, occupies all of the techniques of the biodynamic French intensive system, and he produces a bed, a formation of soil, into which the four elements are utterly and perfectly combined in balance of participation, thereby permeating and permitting the revolutionibus to play utterly its full law and part. Out of that performance, which is a spiritual invocation, comes a matter that no man suspects or calculates or can ever calculate. Out of that bed must flow, because of the constitution of that bed, which is herbal largely, life into death into life, a sudden uprising of something he never anticipated, a whole collection of new weeds, or of a new fertility in other weeds, as well as his own plants. For indeed the whole biodynamic is full of weeds. It's the whole principle, it's the background, it's the origin. And out of those new weeds are full of new scents, of new seeds, of new oils, infected of the revolutionibus, the perpetual cycle of change. And now you have magnification, part of Botticelli's Primavera vision. Magnification, uplift, so that out of those weeds come new insects, new interweaving of the elements, of the earth, fire, air, and water, which man has not calculated, has not ordinated or applied. It has happened because of the avenue of his approach. He has made it possible. And from those new weeds, from that new vitality, come new insects, new birds, and they keep an ordinance, a balance, which is new, but it is an uplift. It is a magnification uplift. And suddenly, something has happened, which is incredible. The very question that you put at the beginning. Man's image, his very finger touching Ide and unable to touch it, is lifted by this lift. He is aware of a new beauty that he never suspected, the very touch of new insects, of new fertility, and that is the word, fertility, is a magnification. And because now his image, his idea, is magnified, he is again reborn with seed of physical desire, of wish, of a more beautiful strawberry, of a more beautiful weed, of a more beautiful bird. And it is already born. This is the greatest peak of the invention of biodynamic vision. So that you perceive instantly that from that very thing that happens in the garden flows into his happiness in the nursery, his poetry, his music, his painting, his application of color, of sound, and all of those attributes are lifted with it into a perfection and a purity and an enormity, and it is immeasurable. It is a cornucopia. Therefore, you see then how important then are the techniques that bring about that matter of fertility. And those techniques are the marriage of biodynamic, which is always vision, clairvoyance, clear vision of what is over the mountain, over the forest, into the sky, into the star forever. Never calumnious with man's invention, with man's mere capacity. But that vision then holds man to his obedience to the law. The matter then that you ask is the cycles of propagation. Mm-hmm. To reveal this, one really has to go through the revolution of this. Have you realized that there is one inclination and one declination of the sun, 6 months? 6 months inclination and 6 months declination. We are now in the declination. You have to realize an enormity here that changes an aspect towards it. The whole of what we call summer and winter are a total different aspect altogether. The whole excitement is the matter of inclination and dis-excitement, disenchantment, if you like, of declination. One is waking and the other is dying, sleeping. So that on December the 21st, the inclination of the sun starts something which has never happened in the world before. God! Everything in nature is aware that something has happened that has never happened before. Oh yes, there's been a cycle. But none of the planets and stars have been in the same position. The whole aspect of them is different. The whole story is a new story. It's a new notation put together. And that everything is aware of an excitement, an opening up. Every evening, it is a little lighter. Every morning, earlier, it is a little lighter. It is this light increase that is so exciting. Everything is aware that something has happened and is quivering. And the angle is small because the rotation round the sun of the planets is drawn and governed by the planets. And the nearer they get to the sun, the faster do they travel and revolve. Therefore, the angle is oval and not round. Therefore, the angle of total dormancy of winter is oval. And as you reach March, the equinox, equal light and equal day, equal night, light and equal dark, you have reached the maritime, the perfection, the period of dawn of each day. And that is exactly what Botticelli painted in the Primavera. Birth, love. The whole world, from the moment that it began on December the 21st, begins to see everything differently. And by the invocation of the equal, everything in the whole world falls in love. All the oceans fall in love with the continents, and they beat against the cliffs with their highest tides to invade. And all the forests fall in love, and all the birds see each other differently and go in pairs and coo and sing and build nests. And all the flowers begin to open bud with love. And everything falls in love. And suddenly, the equinox is over. And it is now always more light than dark. And it increases, more light and less dark. And it is the whole floration of dormancy, the sleep of flowerdom. And suddenly, on June the 21st, everything has ended. It's completely stopped. It is not going on. The very opposite has begun. Death. Closing down. And every night it's a little darker earlier. And every morning it's a little darker later. And everything is aware of it. And it is saying, yes, get ready. You're going to go to sleep. But it's still, don't worry, it's still much lighter all the time that it's dark. So it's wonderful. And it goes on, holds. And suddenly, it is again the equinox of September, when light and dark are equal, and everything again falls in love, but not with birth. The very opposite, with death, with closing down. It's the very opposite, falling in love. And you get all the neap tides. They go out over the horizon. And then the huge angle drops into sleep. And in both of those periods are birds, animals, people who live in the opposites. There are all those that live in the summer, the helios. And when the helios are all saying, oh, it's so wonderful, isn't this marvelous? All of the bulbs, all of the camellias, all of the narcissi, all of the scillas are fast asleep in dormancy, unable to bear any of the procedure. And so they wake and sleep in those invections of the revolution of us, in which their destiny is written. With that inclination and declination of the sun of 6 months are 12 of the moon. Here enters an attitude of biodynamic. There can be no question, if you like to look at it in words. The sun pushes, but the moon pulls. The moon is magnetic of all the moisture of the world. You would know, if you had done navigation, that there can be a certain point in the ocean where at the full moon of the spring equinox, the tide will actually rise 32 feet above its normal oceanic level. And at the neap tide of the no moon of the fall, that tide will only be 2 feet above the oceanic level. But it is not only the oceans and all the tides that the moon is pulling and the sun is pushing that is operating the whole flow of tides. It is all the water in the world. Why is it that all the springs are in the tops of mountains? And this is what makes the streams and the rivers. And it is not the streams and the rivers. It is the water between two leaves. It is the moisture that is in your skin. And when the moon is full, why is it that although you draw the blinds, you cannot sleep? Wake up, come on, wake up. There's wonderful things are happening. It's no time to sleep. And you see, in nature there is no sleep when the moon is inclining. But when the moon is declining, there is sleep at night. But when the sun is inclining, there is no rest in the day. But when the sun is declining, there is the demand to rest in the day. And so always they are in oppositions or positions with or against. That it is indeed the moisture that you apply to a seed, and that when the moon begins to incline, the first invects 2 nights before the new moon, when that moisture is on the seed, the impetus of the moon says, just as the year suddenly changes and begins, so now out of the darkness of the sleep of the moon, which was like the winter, the moon saying, sleep, sleep, is now saying, stop, wake up. And the next night it's more, and it says, wake up. And the next night, wake up. And when the moon gets to half, wake up, I say, wake up, wake up, wake up. And the moon gets to full and nothing can resist it. And the whole force of the moon is pulling with magnetism at these husks around the secret soul, the ego, the ide that's within that seed. And the moon is pulling at the moisture, and suddenly the husks are open. It is not the seed inside. Oh, no, it's not the germ. It's released. It's let out by the elements. They are the operators between the visible and the invisible. Now, the ancient Chinese, of course, knew all this. All the astronomers know it. You can't help seeing it. And the interweaving of the different planets. Are you aware that when you look, for instance, over a mountain of the forests, you will see that enormous quantity of trees? Oh, suddenly you realize, oh, all the fir trees are 80 years old. But all those green trees, the deciduous, are 15. And some of them are even variable. But that's the majority. What is this? The interweaving of Saturn, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, Mars. In their culminations of mathematics and destiny, they wake up the seed, and the others supply the periods of necessity or unnecessity. It is destined, inevitably, totally, that life into death into life. There are thousands of seeds of every tree that must go to the life of a tree. They are the manufacture of soil. They are the huge manufacture of soil, our seeds and the husks. It is not every blossom on an apple that can ever make an apple. There are many apple blossoms that cannot make an apple. They are there because of appledom. Therefore, you see that it is not merely a question that the moon ordinates the birth of seed. What we are pointing to is that there is a mathematics in the inclinations and declinations, not only of the moon and the sun and the turning of the earth, but of the interweaving of the other planets. A Saturn which takes 30 years in her orbit, and they all take different measurements in their orbit, and none of them ever collide. And it is those measurements that ordain the births of different trees that are ordinated by that government, that they shall come into being, that they shall be maintained, or shall perish. How is it that you see every year the metascoia, the redwood, all the seedlings do indeed propagate, and within a few months they're all gone? And suddenly one year they're all growing. The mathematics is there. Now you begin to see the magic of man. The magic of man interweaves in this and can fulfill an ordination. And how important it is that he follows that ordination to fulfill correctly with the law and not against it, not to disorientate. Therefore you see that this is not merely a matter of sowing seeds correctly 2 nights before the new moon, for this is the first great invection. The second huge invection is the half moon that produces the strongest of all magnetisms. That it is indeed after that plant is born that a whole procedure becomes much more magnificent and ordered by the revolution of this inclination and declination. That they have their periods during their growth, which we can so little follow or understand, of sleeping this time at night, and then not at all, not night or day, but growing all the time. And then into the declination when they sleep all the time, and then wake only at a certain period, even at night only. And so you get this total ordinance. Therefore you see that in a presumptuous sense of general statement, your seed should be sown to meet the inclination. Whereas, of course, as there is always sleep with the moon's declination at night, the moment that the moon has become full and begins declining, there is the thing of, like winter, go to sleep tonight, my dears, go to sleep. And the sun is saying each day, oh, don't, come on, wake up. And the moon says, oh, no, you go to sleep tonight, you need a good rest now. And then the next day the sun says, come on, come on, come on. And then suddenly the moon joins the sun and says, I agree, O sun, come on, all of you. You're strong now, you're capable, you've followed our ordination, live. And you get this sudden robustness and tremendous. Why is it you suddenly perceive the whole garden has suddenly begun to grow? Why? Therefore you see that this is an ordination, and that, of course, all transplanting must be done, not only with the declination, but in the declination of the day also, in the evening. Do you follow? Mm-hmm. That is, I think, a question which you were putting to me.
What is the Covelo Garden Project?
It is the vision of biodynamic horticulture married with the child who inwardly seeks this marriage. Its purport is its own, its revelation, that when out of the soul of a person seeks the soul of nature, this project is the garden where that has a capacity to take place. It follows classical techniques into the instrumentation, following the vision which is the law of nature. This project is not necessarily to create horticulturists. A person may come here and study horticulture and never become a gardener, but they may become themselves. In other words, what the state was intended for a person to find destiny, truth. Because of the spirit that is in the plant world, and it has always been assessed from ancient times that the teaching of the herbs is the teaching of God, what can be more relevant? Out of this are endless studies here of art and craft, even through such things as voice therapy, mime, deportment, carpentering, and is intended in time, of course, to include everything, which also includes livestock and all such matters. And that here it is intended that there should be an adjunct project as the horticulture building. Therefore, these builders, with maestros, with teachers, shall build the village in which all of the participants will live within the garden. The oikos in the home, in the garden, in nature. For understand that here enters the word economy. Economy, as you must know, comes from a Greek, again, Xylophon, who was a great religionist and was believed in by the people. And thus he wrote many essays as models for them to live by. And one of his essays was entitled Economia, concerning oikos, home, nomia. And in it, in this essay, he states absolutely clearly, economia is the family in the home, in the garden. There is your very essence of economy. For in this there is no waste. There is the interflow between a family living in a home, in a garden, in nature. The give and the take, the balance of biodynamic. There is no trucks running in every direction. There are no iced this, iced that, frozen airplanes tearing in and out. No tearing hundreds of tons of this down to there and bringing back 100 tons of dead flour. It is the production of the area within its circle of discontinuity. And therefore it is fertile, productive, and belongs. And in this, it must be obvious that a family, that people must live in the environment, the environment. That what they grow, what they eat, must be concerned, connected with them, with their glands, with their senses, with their muscles. You can't eat something that you know nothing, have no contact about at all. It cannot have any influence upon you. And one must here see and realize that you can't just travel to a place to get there. It is the travel. It is what happens, getting there, that is what matters. It is like life. It is useless to think of security, of insurance, that you work so that you have a pension and then die. It is living life. It is what matters. And it is the living in the home and the garden that is life. And that nature is the educator and the leader. In the days when man lived in balance, he was looked over and guided by the stars. And when it was observed that man was beginning to use his intellect, and unbalance had entered, 2 stars were ordered to descend to Earth to direct man. It so happened that those 2 stars arrived upon Earth at the very moment that the archangel raised his sword and drove Adam and Eve out of the garden. And these 2 stars, to fulfill their duty, attempted to follow Adam and Eve. And the angel raised his sword and said, "None may pass in the land of darkness where these 2 mortals must travel." And the 1 star raised an emblem and said, "I am the gift of the king of fishes, and I represent strength." And the other raised an emblem and said, "I am the gift of the queen of crops, and I represent comfort." And the angel recognized his 2 brothers and lowered his sword. And thus they passed in the guise of 2 herbs, Rosmarinus and Lavendula, strength and comfort, in the guise of what became known later as male and female. And thus they traveled in the land of darkness, always with Adam and Eve, to show them the way, the path that led to where they had come from, the garden.